My grandmother used to say it the same way every single week, without variation, without explanation, without apology. When the sun goes down on Friday, the kitchen rests. As a child, I thought it was about tiredness. As a teenager, I thought it was about religion. It was not until I was deep inside the Kabbalistic texts, years into my formal study under Rabbi Eliezer Greenberg, who had himself studied under the last students of the Chofetz Chaim, that I understood what she had actually been doing all those years. She was not resting. She was protecting something. She was sealing the financial vessel of her household at the precise moment the ancient teachers identified as the most spiritually vulnerable window of the entire week. And she was doing it not with a prayer or a ritual candle or a formal ceremony. She was doing it by stopping, by putting down the cloth, by letting the water go still, because the teachers she inherited her wisdom from had understood something about water, about Shabbat, and about the relationship between domestic activity and the flow of prosperity that most families in our generation have completely lost. My name is Rabbi Naomi, and I have spent more than 30 years inside the texts that most people never reach: the Zohar, the Talmud Yerushalmi, the writings of the Arizal, the practical Kabbalah of the Sephardic masters. My grandfather carried this lineage through 3 generations of economic survival that had no rational explanation. My teacher carried it through 40 years of guiding families out of financial stagnation and into what the tradition calls bracha, blessing that multiplies. And I am going to give you something today that I rarely share in a public forum, because the times we are living in have made it necessary. The specific law governing the Friday sunset threshold, why it exists, what it protects, and what most households are unknowingly destroying every single week by ignoring it. Stay with me to the absolute end of this teaching. What I am about to walk you through has a sequence, and if you step away before the final piece, you will have the knowledge but not the key that activates it. Before we go any further, type the words "seal the vessel" in the comments right now. This is your declaration of readiness. Say it publicly. The wisdom you are about to receive responds to the posture you bring to it. Type those words and let us begin. You have probably tried to improve your financial life in the ways the modern world recommends. You have tracked your spending. You have set income goals. You may have read books about wealth mindset, listened to podcasts about financial freedom, perhaps even worked with a coach or a planner. And some of it has helped, at the margins. But there is a ceiling you keep pressing against, and it does not move. The account grows, and then something comes and takes it back. The opportunity opens, and then something closes it. The momentum builds, and then something, you cannot quite identify what, disrupts it. You tell yourself it is the economy. You tell yourself it is timing. You tell yourself it is almost there, almost, just a little more, just a little longer. I am not here to criticize any of this. I have watched brilliant, hard-working, spiritually sincere people do exactly what you are doing for decades and produce the same result, because they are working on the visible layer, while the actual problem is happening one layer beneath it. The ancient teachers had a term for what you are experiencing. They called it dalit, the door that does not open. Not because the abundance is absent, because the channel through which it should flow has not been maintained. Think of it this way. Imagine a pipe running from a reservoir of clean water to your home. The reservoir is full. It has always been full. The intention of the one who built the system was always that your home would have water. But if the pipe develops a crack, a specific kind of fracture at a specific joint, the pressure drops before it reaches you. You open the tap, a trickle comes. You assume the reservoir is low. The reservoir is not low. The pipe is cracked. And the crack, in the language of the tradition, is not repaired by working harder at the tap. It is repaired at the fracture point. The Talmud Yerushalmi records something remarkable about the financial lives of Jewish communities across centuries of exile and economic pressure. In the communities that maintain the Shabbat laws precisely, not approximately, not partially, but with the exactness the sages encoded, the financial floor held. Not because of magic, because of law. The same law that governs physics governs the spiritual economy. Precision produces outcome. Let me show you when I first encountered the specific law we are discussing today, and what it cost me before I learned to honor it. I was 34 years old. It was a Friday evening in late October, the sky going dark early the way it does in that season, and I was standing at the kitchen sink finishing what I had told myself would take only 5 more minutes. My husband had already made kiddush. The candles were lit, the table was set, but I had left a pot soaking and a stack of dishes from the afternoon, and something in me, the practical, efficient, waste-nothing part of me, decided that 5 minutes would not matter. My teacher, Rabbi Greenberg, had spoken about the Friday sunset boundary many times. I had heard it, I had cataloged it in my notes, but I had not fully internalized it as a law with consequence, rather than a custom with preference. So I stood at the sink. I finished the dishes, and I dried my hands and sat down for Shabbat feeling organized and ready. That month, 3 things that had been moving in our financial life came to a strange standstill. A payment that was expected did not arrive on time. A conversation with a potential partner went cold without explanation. A project that had been building for 2 months quietly dissolved. Each one had a logical explanation, but I am a person trained to look beneath logical explanations for the spiritual root, and something in me knew. I brought it to Rabbi Greenberg the following week. I did not mention the dishes immediately. I described the pattern: 3 things, same window, same arrest of momentum. He looked at me for a moment and said, "Tell me about your last 3 Shabbatot. What did your Friday evening threshold look like?" I told him. I told him about the dishes. He did not lecture me. He simply said, "You know what you interrupted. Now you know what to restore." Within 3 weeks of sealing the threshold correctly, completely, precisely, on time, the movement returned. Not a windfall, a restoration of flow. The payment cleared. The conversation reopened. The project found a new form. The pipe had been cracked. The crack was repaired. The water moved again. Now I want to give you the actual mechanics of this law, what the tradition teaches, why the Friday sunset moment carries the specific weight it does, and exactly what must stop and what must be in place before that threshold is crossed. Because this is not simply about dishes. The dishes are the most concrete, visible example of a broader principle, and I am going to take you through the full architecture of what is actually happening at that moment and why it matters to your financial life specifically. The spiritual principle at the foundation of this law is what the Kabbalistic tradition calls Magen HaBracha, the protection of the blessing. The ancient teachers understood Shabbat not as a cessation of work for the purpose of rest, though rest is a real and important dimension of it, but as a weekly sealing of the financial and spiritual vessel of the household. From Friday sunset until Saturday night, the home enters a different frequency. The Zohar describes this in language that sounds mystical until you understand its practical dimension. The energy of Shabbat is the energy of completion. Nothing is unfinished. Nothing is in process. Everything is in a state of shalom, wholeness, not peace in the passive sense, but wholeness in the structural sense. A vessel that is whole can hold what is poured into it. And the pouring that happens during the Shabbat hours, the bracha, the blessing that the tradition says flows into households during this window, requires a vessel that is sealed. Not metaphorically sealed, practically sealed. Dishes in the sink are not sealed. They are in process. They are unfinished. And the law of the vessel is that unfinished work inside the home at the Shabbat threshold signals to the spiritual economy that the vessel is not ready to receive. This is the first dimension of the law, and it applies to more than dishes. It applies to everything that constitutes incomplete domestic work. Laundry that has been started but not finished, a task that has been half done and left mid-state, money-related paperwork left open on the table. The tradition is not asking for perfection, it is asking for intentional completion. There is a difference between a home that has chosen to rest from its work and a home that is simply stopped mid-stride. The first posture is one of abundance. I have done what I set out to do, and now I release the day with full hands. The second is one of incompletion. I ran out of time, and I am setting down what I could not carry. The spiritual economy reads these as completely different signals. The second dimension of the law is what the Sephardic masters called Kavod Shabbat, the honor of the threshold moment itself. The way you cross into Shabbat is the declaration of what your household is aligned with for the entire week that follows. The sages who documented this were not speaking theoretically. They were observing outcomes across communities and across generations. Households that crossed the Friday sunset threshold in chaos, unfinished, rushed, distracted, burdened, reported consistently different financial outcomes over time than households that crossed it with intentionality and order. The threshold moment is a weekly reset of the financial frequency of your home. If you cross it in disorder, you are setting the frequency of the coming week in disorder. If you cross it in wholeness, vessel sealed, work completed, home in a state of intentional rest, you are setting the frequency of the coming week in a posture of readiness to receive. The third dimension is the one that surprised me the most when I first encountered it in the writings of the Arizal. It concerns water specifically. The Kabbalistic tradition assigns water to the Sephirah of Chesed, the divine attribute of loving kindness and financial flow. Running water in the home after the Shabbat threshold is not simply unfinished work. In the language of the Arizal, it is an open channel at the wrong moment. During Shabbat, the spiritual work is not about flow, it is about containment, about sealing, about holding. Running water, particularly in the context of cleaning, which is an act of removing and dispersing, runs counter to the spiritual directive of the Shabbat hours. This is not superstition. It is a coherent internal logic that the ancient teachers encoded into observable domestic practice so that ordinary families, not scholars, not mystics, not people with access to the texts, could carry the law in their bodies through daily action. Your grandmother may not have been able to explain the Arizal, but if she sealed her kitchen at sunset on Friday, she was applying his understanding precisely. Here is what this means in practical terms for your household beginning this Friday. The target is to have every dish washed, dried, and put away before the sun touches the horizon on Friday evening. Not at sunset, before sunset. Give yourself a buffer of at least 15 minutes. The tradition calls this buffer zone the Tosefet Shabbat, the addition to Shabbat, and it is not an optional margin. It is an architectural feature of the law. The reason is this: the spiritual threshold does not operate on a clock, it operates on light, and the light changes before the official time. If you are finishing your last dish as the sun is setting, you are already inside the threshold. The seal has already been compromised. Begin your Friday kitchen work earlier than you think you need to. Treat the Friday afternoon hours as a dedicated preparation window, not a rushed final push, but an intentional completion practice. What you are doing is not cleaning, you are sealing a vessel. Once the kitchen is sealed, work complete, sink empty, surfaces clear, there is one final act the tradition prescribes before Shabbat is officially welcomed. Stand at the center of your home or in the room that feels most like the heart of your household and speak one sentence of release. The words do not need to be in Hebrew. though if you know the Shabbat prayers, they carry additional weight. The sentence is simply this: this home is whole. What belongs to this household is protected. What is meant for us is already in motion, and we receive it in rest. Say it slowly. Once is enough. This is not a magic incantation. This is a statement of alignment, you confirming to the spiritual reality around you that your vessel is sealed and your posture is one of receptivity, not pursuit. The week that follows a sealed Shabbat threshold is a different week than the week that follows a chaotic one. I have observed this in my own household for over 2 decades. I have observed it in the households of the people I have guided. The evidence is not dramatic, it is consistent. Consistency in this tradition is considered a higher form of proof than drama. Overnight miracles are for fairy tales. The law produces steady, compounding, observable movement. That is what you are building toward. There is something I want you to know about what comes immediately after you begin this practice, because almost everyone I have taught this to has encountered the same thing in the first 2 or 3 weeks, and almost everyone has misread it. In the first Friday after you seal the threshold correctly, fully, intentionally, with the declaration in place, you may feel a surprising sense of peace during the Shabbat hours. Not manufactured peace, a quietness that feels different from ordinary rest. Notice it. That is the vessel in its sealed state. That is what your household is supposed to feel like 1 day a week, every week. But then, in the days that follow, particularly around Tuesday or Wednesday of the following week, a test will arrive. Something financial will create friction. A bill, an unexpected expense, a conversation that generates anxiety about money. This is not a sign that the practice has failed. This is the specific test the tradition warns about. The moment the spiritual economy asks whether you have genuinely changed your frequency or simply performed a ritual once. The answer to this test is not effort, it is posture. Return to the declaration. Remind yourself that the vessel is sealed, the flow is restored, and the friction you are experiencing is not the truth of your financial reality. It is the echo of the old frequency leaving. Do not panic, do not retreat, do not speak death over your own breakthrough. Hold the posture. The second and third Shabbat will deepen what the first one began. By the 4th week of consistent practice, I have seen people describe a qualitative shift in the texture of their financial life that they do not quite have language for yet. The language will come. Keep the practice going until it does. What I have given you today is the law of the Shabbat threshold, the ancient protection most families in our generation have never been taught because the modern world separated the spiritual practice from the financial outcome and left people with a beautiful tradition that had lost its understood power. You now have the understanding back. The law is precise, the practice is simple, and it is available to you beginning this Friday. If what you heard today reached something real in you, if it explains something you have been feeling but could not name, or confirms something your grandmother carried but never explained, tell me in the comments what surprised you most. I read every comment and I will respond to as many as I can. Your engagement here is not just a number, it is a name I see, and the names of those who take action are the names I carry with me. Next week, I am going to share the specific words the tradition says must never be spoken at a dinner table if you want the financial frequency of your household to hold. And one phrase that most families say so casually they have no idea it has been working against everything they are building. Subscribe and press the notification bell now. If you miss that teaching, you will not know what to stop saying. And what you do not stop saying can undo everything you are starting to build. If what I shared today was of value to you, press the like button. It signals to this platform that ancient wisdom still matters, and it places this teaching in front of someone who is sitting in exactly the pattern you used to be in, looking for exactly this explanation. May your vessel be sealed. May what belongs to your household find its way to you with ease. May every Friday sunset from this day forward be a threshold you cross in wholeness, in readiness, and in the full expectation of a week that brings what you have been prepared to receive. Shalom.